Well, hello again. So, back for another week of coding. This time, something a little bit different. We're going to go for a bit of HTML, teeny bit of HTML, but mostly JavaScript. And this is the language of the internet. So, we're going to see that the things that we've learned through Python, through block coding, all the logic that we've learned means that we can turn our hands to pretty much any language. As long as you know the same old things like making variables, loops, if, else's, all those kind of things that we've talked about over the last, I think it's 12 weeks, maybe 13 weeks now, you can adapt. And that's the real reason, because when we teach Python, for example, it's not necessarily the most used language in the world. It is a very well used language, but it's a really nice one to get started with, and it lets you access lots of different languages as well. So the first thing I'm going to get out of the way is HTML isn't a coding language. It's the language of the internet, hypertext markup language. JavaScript is a coding language, but HTML is just a kind of more of a descriptive language showing you how the internet page is created. So some people get a little bit pernickety about whether HTML is code or not. I think, well, it isn't code for starters, but it is still useful to know the language, and that's what it is, a language rather than a programming language. So we are going to use JavaScript to help us do things on web pages. So I'm old enough to remember that when HTML, or when web pages first came about, I was very young, but it still was in my lifetime, that all you could see was static text. And JavaScript really helped us to make things do stuff. And that's the creativity part. But you need to know a tiny bit of HTML to get to the JavaScript part. So let's see by doing, which is always the best way. So if I come in and I'm going to go to the screen and my camera, there we go. So I've updated the page. So this is what the page used to look like. If you refresh back to the digital.edu.je page, as we're used to doing now, that's the Thinking as a Coder page. And when we refresh it, we shall now see at the bottom here two new links, a JavaScript code guide and a new link to Trinket. So before, when we were using Trinket, it was for the Python version. So when we clicked on it, it took us to the trinket.io Python 3 at the top there. Don't need to see it. And that was us to do Python. You can see main.py. This time round, when we go to trinket.html at the bottom here, it's going to take us to a page which has, it's often different. You may get the same one as me, but it's got an example page with HTML and style.css in here. We're going to need that in a minute. So we're going to talk about this. So make sure you've gone to this page, and remember that that is digital.edu.je, or you can go straight to trinket.io/HTML. But both of those are being able to done through this page here. I advise you go to the digital.edu.je page because you might want to have a look, I think you should have a look at the JavaScript code guide, because that will enable you to see what I'm doing on the screen. So while I will zoom in on this stuff and go right in so we can see this, I don't need the outline view here. So I can zoom in so we can see stuff a little bit better. It's could be useful for you to actually have that page up yourself. And if you're watching not live, you can spend time. And if you've got multiple screens or multiple devices, you can have one open in one and watching on the other. So again, thinking as a coder, go to trinket.html to bring up whatever page it gives you. Sometimes it gives you slightly different pages. And we'll see here that we have both an example of the code on the left-hand side and what that page is doing. So we are live. Well, I'll use the word coding, even though I technically shouldn't for this. We're live coding a website here, and we can see what's happening as we go through it. So you may not be able to see all these things. I'm actually going to break this down and have a zoom in on this a little bit here and have a little talk about this, because you should be able, I'm going to ignore this style.css. In fact, I'm going to get rid of all of this, and you'll see that I'll undo it in a second. You'll see that when we get rid of style, all the styles go. We're just left with the text. If I bring the styles back, the styles come in. So HTML is made up of different parts. HTML is the raw code. If you want things to look pretty, then we should use style, or see it's cascading style sheets. And if we want to do anything, we're going to use JavaScript. So we're going to do loads of different things today, and I'll take you through how you start with this. But just before we make a start, if we go into the HTML here, you may be the first time you've ever seen HTML code. There it is. We can pull it apart. And all we need to know is things come in tags. And I will use this site to do that. So if we start off with this chevron, the greater than or equal to greater than or less than signs, and I write HTML and I close the chevron there, that's a tag. Now, most tags in HTML come with beginning tags that look like this, and then they come with end tags that look like this, the same tag, but with a / in it. So when we come to look at our HTML code here, we will see that we have that at the bottom. We have an open HTML at the top, and we have a closed HTML at the bottom. Here we have an open head tag here for heading, and we have a closed head tag. So when you open, you 99% of the time close a tag to go with it. Here, the body of the text, and we close that with the end of the text there with that /. So that's kind of really, while we will go into more detail, don't need the dot there. While we go into the fundamentals, we have beginning tags that look like this, and we have end tags, which are the same, but with that /. And there are lots that we can get to know. I'm not going to go into too much detail with HTML today. If we did B for bold, that's the language for bold. Then to close the bold tag, it's just the / with B. Everything between this text would be bold. Okay, so that word would have hello in bold. So that's really the fundamentals. We're going to go through it, and I'll go fairly quickly, but it's really the JavaScript that I want to play around with today. So I'm going to have a look, again, without thinking as a coder page. You can open up the JavaScript code. Hopefully you'll be able to see it here, because I'll zoom in maximum. Try and keep an eye on my head there as well to make sure I'm not getting in the way too much. So with JavaScript, we need to call it. So let's go through some of the fundamentals here. If I was to get rid of all of this, and I'm actually even going to delete this style sheet as well. So when we start off, we like to call things index.html. That's standard for the very first page, the home page, the index page of your website. So every other page can be called like page 2, page 3, page 4.html, but the first one is standard to be index.html. So to make a web page, you need to start off with HTML. You need to tell the internet the language that you're using is HTML. So we do that with that chevron, and then we do HTML, and then we close it, and watch what Trinket does, which is lovely. It closes the tag for me automatically. Very, very useful. Not all web design programs do that. The good ones do, but not all do. So if it doesn't close it for you, you need to close it yourself. And then usually I press enter at least once, because we got the top and the bottom of the web page. So that's that. Okay. Then we saw some other things in the code guide here. We saw head for heading. Now, what we do here is we usually separate the web page into the head, which is the header, press enter. Then after that, after the heading page there, so we have a chunk of text in between there, which is the heading, and I'll talk about that in a second. Then we have the body of the text, and we can have a footer, but I'm going to leave that for now. But really the main fundamentals are some text that tells the internet what the page is. So for example, this is very, very basic, but I could have a title. So what I haven't got in here, just for the sake of trying to keep things separate, is I could have a title and end the tag there. And I'm going to keep that not on a separate line, my first page. Now, nothing is coming up on the right-hand side at the moment because nothing is in the body. So the body here is what's displayed in a web page. The header is just kind of information for the internet. So here, when you're seeing all my tabs at the top here, those are headings. Okay. So when you come to thinking as a coder, which is the first one there, That's the header. So the title on that page would be, and it's all in capitals there, so would be Thinking as a Coder, like that. So that would be, we don't see it in the right-hand side, but those are the titles. So I'm going to leave the title for now, but it is something important. And we can write hello world, which is usually the first thing that we do in web pages. As long as it's inside the body, then we start to see it here on the right-hand side. Now, this is bad, okay? You shouldn't just write text in. You should tell the internet what type of text it is. Now, if we were doing very, very basic text, you might want to use the chevron again, and we do a P for paragraph, close that, and I can do hello world. And I tend not to then write the other P tag, the end tag here on a separate line. We usually keep the text stuff together, okay? So here we have hello world. And if I want to make this bold, then inside the paragraph, we would call this a nested tag. We would then have the B, and it finishes it off. And first words are, and then we have hello world. And I need a space at the end of that. And you can see now that one is in bold and one isn't. So that's it. I could change the hello world by changing the B tag to a U for underline. And I'm getting all these red X's now because I opened an underline tag. So I need to close an underline tag. And then it will, sorry, I did an end tag there. So a beginning tag and an end tag. And there we have our underline. So HTML isn't actually that complicated. We can do images, we can do links, there's lots of other things that we can do, and some of them look slightly more complicated than others, but in essence, writing a web page isn't that hard. But for today, we're not going to focus on HTML, we're going to focus on JavaScript, the code itself. So I'm just going to get rid of all of that. We've still got our header, and we've still got our body, but what we're doing in the code guide is saying that we want to put our file, we want to put our code somewhere else. So we do that using script as the title, and we need to tell it what it's looking for. So in a weird way, let's go back to it. It follows the same kind of idea. I don't want it to be written onto the web page. I just want to tell the web page where to look for code. So I use my tag and I do script, and I could close it. And then there you go. Trinket has opened a script and closed a script, but there's nothing in it. So what this code guide here is saying is inside this tag, let's tell it where to go. And the source, which is src, is script.js. So that's the code that we want to copy. So now you can copy all of this straight away. Again, technically I should have told it what type to do, but it works without it. But let's be good about our stuff here. This does work, but it's not standard. So we would usually tell it what doc type it is. But like I said, it's not really done anything for the purposes of today. That's just a good standard bit of code you should put in to be nice, to tell the internet what to do. So again, we're telling it with the speech marks here what file that we're looking for. So inside that script, inside the tag, we put that source and then we tell it. And the color codes tell me that I've written that correctly. But the problem I've got here is I don't have this file called script.js. So I need to create it. So we like to separate. As you saw before when we opened up this page, we had a cascading style sheet. And that was, if we remember back, and we can go and we can open up a new one if we wanted to, open up a new tab. And we had, it's copied my other one. I thought it might do that. If I just grab that code and close it down, because it's using the same cookie to keep me up to date. If I grab another window with a different browser logged into it, come into here, there we go. So when I do my Trinket, we had that style.css. I'll just zoom in there. So that's the file type. HTML is the language of the internet, hypertext markup language. Style.css is cascading style sheets. They make things pretty, but what we actually want is a script .js for JavaScript. So we press the plus and we do script.js. script.js like that. And that tells me now that I have a file called script.js, and that's telling me to go get it. That's all it's doing. And it's very, very important, though, that you do that. Now, if I'd have done a capital S here, that would not now work. So one of the annoyances of HTML and code really in general is that capitalization can make a huge difference. So you do need to make sure, that's why we like to keep to lowercase wherever possible, that we're not making those mistakes. So what we've got in the code guide here is exactly that. That just sets up a HTML page that links to a file called script.js, but we do have to create that file here by pressing that plus button. So now we're ready to go with code, and we're going to do an alert, and we're going to do all of this in the script.js file. So now we don't necessarily need a lot of this. We're going to come back to this in a second because this can get annoying, but I'm going to go to the script page now. And as we can see here, we have different commands. Now, we also have the ability to do comments, which is very important. So what we can see here is where we used to have the hash for Python to do this, we've now got this / for the comments in here. So when we're in, and like I say, you can just copy and paste along with me if you want. So you can copy straight into here. And in the code guide, you can also click on this to open up that in a working mode. So if it's not working for you, just click these pages and it will bring up one that does work. So I'm going to do it live because that's the whole point. So I'm going to do alert, and then I'm going to open up the speech marks and what text I want. And you can see here, it's already done an alert. Now, the annoyance that I have with this is Trinket will refresh the page every key type, which is not good. So when I type in, there you go, I'm pressing OK, and I'm trying to press a H, and it's going to come in with another alert, which says the H there. So what you can do to help you do this and not have to press OK, a letter, then it's going to come down again, then OK, 2 more, I can squeeze 2 more in. Rather than do that, I'm actually going to put in some / while I work. So that's a little cheat for this Trinket. Okay, so I can do hello world like that. I can actually write another comment below this. You can make notes too, and it's always useful to do commenting. So now that I've done that, I can get rid of these 2 to make it the code again. And there we go. I've got my hello world at the top there, and it's working quite nicely. So that can be an annoyance when you're using Trinket to do that. So we're going to do something to help us avoid this problem. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just delete this all for now. And in the code guide, underneath this, we're now going to say, actually, rather than it just look every couple of seconds and keep refreshing, which is really, really annoying, let's make a button so that to do the script, I have to press a button and then it works. So we're going to call a function, very similar to Python in this now, whereas in Python, you would just create it. Here we have variable, and this is the JavaScript. So in JavaScript, to make my function, I'm just going to do var and then whatever the function is, and then we're going to call it. So this is the concept. So a little bit more confusing than Python, which is why we start with Python, right? So similar looking things, but slight differences. And if you have the ability to do multiple code versions like JavaScript, Python, C++, lots of other things, that's a really useful skill to be able to flick between them. So in this particular case, like I said, I'm just going to write them out, but you've got the code here should you want to just copy and paste that. We're going to come in here now and say var for variable, and then I'm going to say and we use I like to use camel case function. I like to use capitals to separate the words, equals, and we're going to say it's a function. And we have to say that. That's why it's got it. We use the speech marks, and we can talk about what might go. So the brackets, we can talk about what might goes into those at a later stage. Then we're going to use a curly bracket to use that. Press enter, and it finishes off that curly bracket, which is really useful for us. And inside we write that same thing, alert. So I got my button in another window there, alert, and we do the open bracket, speech marks, hello world, like we did before. But unlike before, this is not calling it because we haven't called the function. Whereas before it was just going to do it straight away. This is waiting for me to call that function before it works. Now for the really thing, the annoying thing that gets me every time with JavaScript, we need the semicolon afterwards. That's how we separate the lines. So in Python, you can press enter to do that. But JavaScript is more forgiving with the indents. You don't necessarily need indents all the time because these semicolons are what separate the lines. So again, we can add comments still. Comments go here if we want to just remind ourselves. Comments go here, or, you know, in capitals, never forget the colons. Okay, never forget those. Those are the really, those always are the things. You know, it's easy enough. Usually if you forget it, it will tell you, see a little I here, it'll tell you it's a missing semicolon, it's not going to work. So you press it and then everything goes away. And again, here at the end, I've not finished off my code with a semicolon. So every line needs to finish off with that. And that's why it doesn't stress out and do the massive X's. It just does the information to say, come on, stop forgetting about it. I know it's a common error, but you know, don't forget about it. So we're trying to get that here. So the next thing we need to do is to call this, I'm going to create a button on my web page. Now, because it's going to be on my web page, I need to go to the page script. So this is what we're starting to learn now. We've got our code, which goes in JavaScript, and then we've got the page information or language that goes into HTML. And all I'm going to do now is, because I want to see this now, I put it in the body. Okay. And again, if you want to copy and paste this, because you can't quite see it, this code is going to be in here. There's my button. And that's what I'm going to write now. So inside the body of the text, we write in a tag, which is just button. Now, I could close that button now and it would finish off the button. But like the script, I need to tell it some information inside this first tag. So inside the first tag, I say on click. Now, that's a command that HTML knows. So it's going to start to look for that click. You can have on release, you can have hover over, lots of different things, but we're going to use on click. And then we say equals, what happens? We're going to call something called my function. Now, where did I see that before? And we also need the open and close brackets there. We saw that on my script. That's the function that it's looking for. Okay. Now, the brackets there mean we can put values inside there or other things later on. We're not going to talk about that today, but those brackets are important and very useful later on. So at the moment, I can see this tiny, tiny, tiny little button here. So if I click on that, it says hello world. Why is it tiny? It's tiny because I don't have any words in it. So we want a like click me or something like that. So in between the two tags, so we had our close tag and our open tag with some information in it, we can put some text into here, which would be click me. And we can start to see now we have a button which says click me. And if I click it, it does that function. So all of this part here was really to get us to this point now where we have the ability to just press this rather than have to have it every keystroke work. So that was the only real point of this. So let's get to some nitty gritty about that. And if you were finding it difficult to get to this point, go to the code guide, click on this link here. And as you can see there, it will open up a link which has this area on, exactly what we've just done. So if ever you're finding it difficult to do, just click on the links and it will take you to a working page. Because it might just be you've missed a semicolon, you've done a spelling mistake, something like that, dead easy. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add some style. And So I didn't necessarily want to delete it, but I think it was easy to do so. So we want the style page back. So we're going to have to create a style, all lowercase. And that now says we can make pretty things. So we have the language of the internet, HTML, code, and prettiness, effectively. And what we can do here in the code guide is we can say that we can have different background colors. We can have change the button itself. And we start these kind of styles here with a dot as well before them. Again, we'll go into the detail of styles and CSS and HTML a different time. This is more about the JavaScript. So really, I'm just going to copy all this. It's quite self-explanatory that we have border. You'll see what it means by cursor pointer. And we have widths and heights and color blue and background color light gray. So we can copy all of this style, paste it straight in here. I'm not going to talk about, I'll talk about this on a different time. And now we have a light gray color here. And we have everything going through. So why hasn't this changed everything? Why isn't the background color of the button blue? Because I've said that my style.css is here, but the HTML hasn't been told where it is. So script here said, go and look for a script page. So it did. So in the code guide here, we have to add, as we did before, we have to add the link to the style sheet. And it's a slightly different one. It says link relative, which just means it's in the same place as the HTML, and it's looking for that page. So this is really a straight copy paste that's in there. And now it knows where to look. And now it went for the light gray. Now, the reason why the button didn't change is because when I went to the style, that dot is called a class, and it's the best way of doing stuff. And again, don't worry too much about that. I'm going really fast for this bit because I want to focus on the JavaScript. So because it was a class called my button, I needed to tell it what the button wants to look like. So inside this text in the HTML, I wanted to just inside here, paste that and tell it where it's looking for. And now we have the blue button. So don't worry too much about that. You can click straight through to this link on the code guide to go to where I am. So now we can get to the actual code. And we're going to do some maths. We're going to do some different things and show that it's very, very similar to the skills that we've used for Python. So inside here, we can kind of leave alone everything else now, the HTML, the JavaScript. We're going to go straight to the script, sorry, the CSS. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to still keep it as my function, the thing I press when I click here, which at the moment now is nothing because I've just deleted everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a variable called x, and I'm going to make that equal 2. Don't forget the semicolon. I'm going to do another variable, which I'm going to call y, which equals 3. Don't forget the semicolon. You get used to me saying this. With a new thing called variable maths equals x times, which is the star y. Don't forget the semicolon, okay? And then I'm going to do an alert, which is going to then just say what the maths thing is. Don't forget the semicolon, okay? All that does is say x times y is maths, but now show me that in an alert. The thing called maths, show me it. So when I press the button, I've got 6. Excellent. But that's really kind of boring. So let's make it into more of a game. So this time round, what we're going to do, and again, you can follow all of this through using the information here. Everything in red is the new things that I'm adding. And you can always click on the links to go to those things. So now we're going to do something called a prompt. I want the user to have an interactive experience with this. So the variable x, I'm not going to call it 2. I'm going to call it prompt me, prompt, and then open a speech bracket. And then I'm going to say choose a number in text, which means it's a string. So choose a number, and I'm going to use a capital in here. Don't forget your semicolon if you deleted it at the end. And here, what I'm now going to do is I'll press this click me, and now I have a choose a number. So now I can do 8, and I can press OK, and it's going to show me 24 because it did 8 times the 3. Ah, there we go. So we've got a bit of interactivity. Well, let's add more here. Let's do another prompt. And this time, now another, because I've already asked it to choose a number. Now another. And don't forget the semicolon, always thinking that. The I goes away when you put it in, or it's there if you don't. Get used to that and press click me. And then we've got choose a number, 9, choose another one, 78, 702. There we go. We've made a little calculator going on here. So that's how we get very basic answers, really. So alerts can have these kind of things. So what I want to do, though, is the answer's really, really boring, because if I did, you know, that big number times another big number, it's still going to work it out. There it is. But what I want to do is have more of a story. I want to think about the user experience here. So when we talk about the user experience, what I want to say for the alert is something a little bit more, or a little bit different. So let me do this from the beginning. So inside here, I want to say whatever X is, use that. So whatever the user entered for X, I want it to write that. Then I'm going to say plus, which means add onto the text. And then I'm going to use a speech mark to say times. So this is going to look weird because the X and the times kind of look the same. You can use the star if you want, but I want it to look kind of normal. And then you say add as well, whatever the Y is. And then we add some text, which is going to be an equal sign, because that's still text that I need to write in. And then I add the answer, which is the maths variable. So that looks complicated, but really all it's saying is whatever number we chose first, write a times, then the other number equals the answer. So when we press this here, we choose a number, 65, add 34, and we get the full string here. Now, I don't like the fact there's no spaces in here, so I'm going to add a little space before and after the X, and before and after the equal sign. And now when I type stuff in, oh, there we go. Now when I type stuff in, 45. Oh, something's trying to activate Find My iPhone. Let's bring that to the side. 45, press OK. And 78, press OK. And that's a little bit better. Although I did miss out. Sometimes it takes a little while. So here there isn't a space after it. But I bet if I do it again, it will be. Sometimes it takes like 10 seconds to catch up with the code. There it is. And it's a bit more spaced out. Difficult to see on the screen there, but you can just about make it out. That's a bit better. So where can I take it from here? Well, now we can start to use, like we learned in Python back near the beginning, we can do things like random numbers. So we can end up starting with things like games. So we're going to have like like we did with Python, we're going to have a guessing game icon, and we're going to guessing game or guess the number. And we're going to see that actually it's very, very similar. We've just got more semicolons in here. We've just got a little bit different, what we call syntax, or the way it looks, just looks a little bit different. And that's the difference between JavaScript and Python. It's no different. It's just, you know, it's no, like the logic is no different. Just it looks slightly different and behaves slightly different. And sometimes different programming languages are good for one thing and sometimes they're good for another. But doing things on the internet, on web pages, it's easier to use JavaScript, I would argue. Some people may like Python still, but it's really quite simple to use JavaScript. So if we want to do random now, because I don't want the prompt and the prompt, I'm going to get rid of all of this, including the alert actually. So we're back to the beginning here. And this time I'm going to say var random, because this is something that exists on the internet. And like Python, this one is called math.random, but you don't have to load any libraries for this anymore. And we end up with, sorry, did I do a star there? Sorry. Speech marks afterwards to say put a number in there. And then alert, because I want to see what I'm typing in here, random. Okay, don't forget my semicolon after every line. So when I click it, I've got this now long number, difficult to see there on the page. I've got a long decimal number. Every time I click that, I get a new decimal number, because as we remember from Python, hopefully, that that all we have here is those random options. So how can I do that? Well, we can do the same thing as we did before with Python, and we can have times by 10 to make it a little bit better. So when I press this now, we've got a number, at least it's not got 0 something, but I don't like the decimals afterwards. So what I'm going to then do is at the very, very beginning here, I'm going to do another math.floor, which means just do the beginning one and put all of that into a bracket. Again, you can follow this code. If I'm going a bit fast, I'm just trying to get through a lot with only 10 minutes to go. You've got these items in here, and you can follow one after the session if you want to go a bit further. So we've got the alert. We've got now these numbers here when we click along, and that's looking a little bit better. We're getting whole numbers each time, and that will enable us to play games, to do a create your own adventure where random things happen. And I think that's really, really interesting. So the only thing I would say is that this does actually give you a value of 0. So we need to do at the very end, we need to add 1. So this gives you 0 to 9 rather than 1 to 10 because of the way the random number works. So we just add that 1 on to help us out. So the next thing we need to do is sometimes you can get the user to confirm actions and to press OK and things like that. So rather than just a prompt, we call this a confirm. So what we're going to do next is we're going to try and put all of those together. We're learning the building blocks here, and next week we'll make the game full time. And here we're going to have var question. So var is the variable. And we're going to equals, it's a confirm. In other words, we're going to get the person to confirm something. Do you want to continue? Okay, and then we're going to put a question mark in because it's a question. Don't forget the semicolon. We're getting used to that. And alert afterwards, because it's an action that happens after the confirm, is alert you pressed OK. Okay, so with an exclamation mark there. We'll talk about what happens if you don't do that in a second. But right now, if I click that, do you want to continue? OK, you pressed OK. If I try it again and press cancel, it says you pressed OK again because I didn't give it the option. This is where we're going to start talking about our ifs and our elses. So we're going quite quickly now because we're building on the knowledge that we had before in Python. And in Python, we needed our if and our elses. So what we're going to have here is we're going to have var question equals confirm. But then after that here, we're going to indent, I'm just going to indent this, although we don't have to here. If, and then the question, the thing that we have just made, if this variable equals true. Now, this is where we deal with 3 equal signs that we've not had to deal with before in Python to do the Boolean values. Is it exactly true? So is it true? If it is, we use these curly brackets, and then we do the alert there like that. And then we close it. So that will say, if it's true, then you do the alert. Now, I am going to tab this in twice just to make it look pretty. Forgot my semicolon because there's an eye icon there. Okay, someone that's just joined in there. We are teaching HTML and JavaScript today, so you can go back and have a look at this. And we're using a code guide to help us out. Just saw someone join the chat. So if you go to the Thinking as a Coder page, use this code guide, use this HTML, but just watch the video from scratch if you've only just joined. So the whole idea here is we're doing this HTML JavaScript code, and we've said if it's true, you say you press OK. And then after here, after we've done that, if it's true, we can then do the else, which here is the alert, which is you use the speech mark, you pressed cancel. So now we need our logic in here. So we're not getting too bad for that. We need our semicolon after the end here. And we've closed our bracket. That all looks fine. Let's try it out and check. Click. Do you want to continue? OK. I pressed OK. Now let's test and do cancel. you press cancel. So we have our if and our else's. Now, this is going to make the foundation of a game that we're going to make. We're going to make a create your own adventure as well as a feeling lucky game. And what we can do now, just to end it, because I'm not going to make you go through this all entirely, although I might actually start it next week with it, because what we're going to go in to have a look at is when we come all the way through to the guessing game, we're going to have an alert. Are you feeling lucky? Yes. Guess if I'm flipping heads or tail. Then we're going to come up with our own heads or tail. We're going to do a random function which decides if it's greater than 0.5, it's a tail, otherwise it's a head. So that gives us our flip. And it will basically tell you that if you guessed right, you got it right. So what we can actually do here is we're going to have two elements to this. We're just going to click, if you just want to have a look what it looks like, you can actually just highlight all of that, or go and click on this link to open up the file. And I can paste it all in here. And then when we press click me, like I said, it takes about 5-10 seconds to work. So I'm just going to give it a brief pause. Press OK. Are you feeling lucky? That was the first line, an alert. I'm just going to press OK to continue. It wasn't a prompt, it was an alert. Guess if I'm going to flip heads or tails. Again, just an alert. It's going to do this behind the scenes, and then it's going to ask me for a prompt. So behind the scenes, it has now chosen a head or a tail using the random function here. And I'm now going to guess H for heads or T for tails. I don't know what it is because it's random. Let's go for T, press OK. Well done, I guessed it right. Look at that. Great, lucky. And that's all it said. If I guessed it right, it's going to say I was right. So let's have another go with the game. We're testing. And this is the Think as a Coder qualification. This part is very important. We've got to test everything works. So I'm going to go for heads this time. Oh, got it right again. What are the chances? Let's keep going. Heads or tails? Heads. Got it right. 3 out of 3. No way I'm getting a fourth one here. Let's go for tails again. Sorry, I wasn't right. My luck ran out. 4 guesses would have been quite the guess. So it does work. This code has got the premise of a game that is just very clicky, very quick. I mean, it's not a fun game, but it is a very quick random game. And you can do that as maybe as a loading while you're waiting for a page to load or something like that. You can play these games. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can start to evolve the game. And again, I'll start the next session off with this in more detail, but this time I'm going to add what we call a user experience. So in this code, I'm going to start to ask the user for a name, because to make something hooky, I'm just going to paste over it, we're going to ask the user to get involved. So what's your name? My name is Rory. Press OK. It says, hello, Rory, let's play a game. I know it's difficult to see on the screen, but you can play along yourself if you're doing the code. And I press OK. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10. So here, I actually chose the answer 5. I've not used a random guess here, I don't think. No, it just says 5 is the answer. So what am I thinking of? 5 is going to get it right. Now, that's a rubbish game, right? It's going to be the same every time. What's your name? Just random text now. What's it? Press 5 again. The answer is always going to be 5. Whereas if I choose something else for the number, it's going to be incorrect. Okay, so here I press OK, and it's not this time. So to make this a better game, we'd want to replace this line with a random piece of code like we did before. So we can make this better by adding random numbers in here. We've got this bit here, the math floor thing that we just used. So again, you can copy this game out, which is a bit better. Then we can just keep making things more and more impressive as you go through. And then eventually we can get to a perfect guessing game. Well, it's not quite perfect, but it's a really good guessing game with scores, tracking scores. Go through the code and have a look now in your own time to see what's going on. And what we'll do next week is have a look at how we can make a create your own adventure game. So you're kind of homework and stuff, if you just want to play around with this, is try and go through the guessing game options here and see if you can work out why I've done everything that I've done, and try and play around with it yourself, make it better each time. So I can see a few of you are actually on that stream. These are the random anonymous penguin and anonymous turtle. So there's at least 2 people having a look at that code right now, and use that to have a look. So that's a really brief introduction into JavaScript. It was a whirlwind trip there, just because it's the same logic as Python that we've used before, just looks a little bit different in what we call syntax. And have a go at that in your own time. And what we'll have a go at next week is a much better kind of dungeon game where you have to make choices to go left or right. You can add random variables in, so every time you play the game, something happens. So if you come across a beast or an enemy in the game, it won't play the same each time. And that's how you make hooky games that, slightly similar each time, but a little bit different. If you're playing Flappy Bird all the way back when that was a thing, it was just the same game over and over, but the blocks were coming in at different random times. If you like playing roguelikes, which are games that change each time, then that's essentially what you do. So if you ever played Hades or Dead Cells, those kind of games that are very popular at the moment, they're actually quite, not simplistic games, but they're a basic game that each time you play it's the same thing, but slightly random each time, which makes you look hooky. And indeed, Fred, you are quite correct. I'm about to get addicted to Hades 2. I loved the first one, and I've been doing a lot of Dead Cells in between, waiting for Hades 2 to come out. So I'm just waiting, possibly for the summer. I don't know if I can hold out that long, just because if I get on it now, just nothing will get done. So I need to give myself a bit of time, because I love the Hades franchise and I can't wait to play the second one. So, this is the starting, if making a game like Hades isn't easy, but coming up with the hook of a quality game is really the hard work. There's a lot of good games out there that are rubbish. They look pretty, but the games are rubbish. And there's a lot of really good games that are kind of what I call low rent. So, you look at the graphics of a Hades and a Dead Cells, quite simplistic, but wow, what a hooky game that is. And that's how you make a good game. Focus on the gameplay, the user experience. And while we're starting off very basic here, and this isn't going to make me any millions, this is the concept that we have. So let's have a look at this. Next week, we'll look at creating our own adventure where you can add your own flavor to this game and potentially make something quite interesting. And with Trinket, you can, make sure you copy this text. Right now I could copy all of this text and paste it somewhere else, but I do have a code guide for the Create Your Own Adventure. So I will release that on this page next week where we can have a go at that. So hopefully that was interesting, and hopefully it showed you everything that you need to, well, not everything you need to know, but what it's really showing you is Python, JavaScript, C++, whichever language that you choose, the logic remains the same, but the syntax is all that changes. So we're going to focus on Python and JavaScript here because I think they're the simplest ones, but it's not stopping you accessing any other code because the logic remains the same. And that's the moral of this week's story as such. See you next week for Create Your Own Adventure, 4 o'clock every Tuesday. Like and subscribe. Thank you very much, everybody.